Hello everyone, and welcome to Revenge Vision. We're glad to have you here, and we hope you enjoy listening to the story on our channel today. Now let's begin today's story. The gravel crunched under the tires of Ethan Roberts' SUV as he turned onto the long dirt driveway of the family dairy farm outside Green Bay, Wisconsin. It was late afternoon, in late fall, the sky already turning a bruised gray, the air sharp with cold. Ethan, 38, had driven straight from his office job in Chicago, skipping the last meeting of the day, just to surprise his mother on her 64th birthday. The farm looked quieter than usual. No sign of his father in the wheelchair on the porch. No lowing of cows being milked in the barn. Ethan parked near the house, grabbed the bouquet of flowers and the box of chocolates from the back seat, and stepped out into the biting wind. Something felt off. The place was too still. Then he saw it, an old pickup truck, half hidden behind the machine shed covered with a fresh blue tarp, weighted down by cinder blocks. He knew that truck. It belonged to his younger brother Landon. Ethan's stomach tightened. Landon was supposed to be across town at his own place. Why was his truck hidden here like it didn't belong? He moved closer, boots sinking into the soft ground. As he rounded the shed, a low, muffled sound drifted from the open kitchen window, his mother's soft crying, broken and desperate. Ethan froze. This wasn't a birthday surprise anymore. This was something else entirely. If you've ever come home expecting a warm welcome and walked straight into a family secret that changed everything, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next. Ethan pressed his back against the cold siding of the house, staying low beneath the kitchen window, where the sash stood open a few inches. The scent of roasting beef and onions drifted out, but it did nothing to ease the knot in his chest. His mother's crying had quieted to shaky breaths, interrupted by a low voice that he recognized immediately, his younger brother Landon. "Just sign it, Mom. It doesn't have to be perfect," Landon said, his tone flat and insistent, lacking the easy charm he usually wore at family gatherings. "We guide his hand. The notary won't know the difference." Ethan's pulse hammered in his ears. He edged closer, careful not to rustle the dry leaves underfoot. "I can't do this to your father," Carol whispered, her voice trembling. "He doesn't even understand what he's signing. Look at him, Landon, he's confused." Landon let out a frustrated sigh. "He knows enough. And if we don't get this done, the bank takes everything. My house first, then this place. You want to end up in some state facility because we couldn't pay the bills." Ethan peered through the narrow gap in the curtains. His father sat in the wheelchair at the kitchen table, his right side limp from the stroke 18 months earlier, his good left hand gripping the armrest so tightly the knuckles showed white. A stack of papers lay spread out in front of him, official-looking forms with bold headings. Landon stood beside the table, sleeves rolled up, a pen in one hand. "The project was supposed to work. I bought that land outside town prime spot for a small warehouse complex, something to bring jobs. The hard money lenders said it was a sure thing. Market was supposed to bounce back, but it didn't. The interest piled up and now they're calling in the loan. My house is already in default, over $350,000. If I don't pay by next month, they foreclose." Carol wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her cardigan. "This farm is all we have left. It's been in the family for generations. The cows are producing, the milk checks are steady. We don't owe anything. That's why we need it." Landon pressed his voice, dropping lower. "The company I'm transferring it to will pay off my debt, and I'll make sure you and Dad are taken care of. It's the only way. If I lose my house, everything falls apart. You don't want that on your conscience." Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. The farm was still running smoothly, cows milked twice a day, equipment maintained, no liens or back taxes. This wasn't about saving the family operation. This was about saving Landon's personal mess. Landon leaned in closer to their mother. "You already helped me once remember that line of credit against the equipment. You signed Dad's name when he couldn't hold the pen. I have the recording. If you don't do this now, I send it to the district attorney. Fraud. You'd be looking at jail time, Mom. And who takes care of Dad then?" Carol's shoulders shook. Please, Landon. There has to be another way. There isn't, he said softer now, almost gentle. Put the pen in his hand. Guide it. One mark, and this is over. Ethan's hands clenched into fists. He wanted to burst through the door to shout at his brother to demand answers, but he stopped himself. Landon was smooth. He would twist everything, make Ethan look like the hysterical one. No, he needed more than just words overheard through a window. He needed proof. He backed away slowly, heart pounding, and circled to the front porch. He waited a few seconds, then slammed the SUV door hard enough to echo across the yard. Mom, Dad, surprise! He called out, forcing cheer into his voice as he climbed the steps. Inside, chairs scraped, papers rustled. Silence fell like a curtain. Ethan opened the door and stepped into the warm kitchen, the smell of dinner clashing with the tension thick in the air. His mother stood at the stove, back turned, stirring a pot with jerky motions. His father stared at the table, eyes wide. Landon leaned against the counter, arms crossed, a tight smile already in place. Ethan, Landon said, pushing off the counter. Didn't expect you. Ethan forced a grin, though it felt like cracking ice. It's Mom's birthday. Thought I'd drive down. He crossed the room, kissed his father's forehead, squeezed his mother's shoulder. All the while, his mind raced. The farm was fine. Landon was the one drowning, and he was trying to drag everyone down with him. Ethan sat at the table, watching his brother closely. The surprise visit had just become something far more dangerous. Dinner came and went in strained silence, broken only by the scrape of forks on plates and the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Landon filled the air with talk about local corn prices and the Packers' upcoming game, his voice too loud, too casual, as if nothing unusual had happened in the kitchen earlier. Ethan nodded along, forcing smiles and small comments, but his eyes kept drifting to his mother, who pushed food around her plate without eating, and to his father, whose gaze lingered on him with quiet urgency. Mom finally stood to clear the dishes, her movements slow and deliberate the way she always did when holding back tears. Dad watched her go, then turned back to Ethan, trying to form a word that came out as a low, frustrated grunt. Landon reached over and patted Dad's shoulder, the gesture almost affectionate, but too quick, too practiced. Long day for everyone, Landon said, standing up. I'll help Mom with the cleanup. You two relax. Ethan waited until Landon disappeared into the kitchen with a stack of plates before he leaned close to his father. Dad, are you okay? He whispered. Dad's good hand lifted slightly, fingers trembling, then dropped back to the armrest. His eyes said more than words ever could: fear, frustration, a plea for help. Ethan squeezed his father's shoulder gently. I know something's wrong. Hang in there. The evening dragged on. Landon suggested watching an old Western on the living room TV, but no one had the energy for it. Mom excused herself early, saying she needed to check on the cows one last time before bed. Dad was wheeled to his room, and Landon announced he would take the pull-out couch downstairs because of his bad back. Ethan climbed the stairs to his childhood bedroom, the familiar creak of the third step echoing in the quiet house. By 11:30, the house had settled into the deep stillness of the countryside. Ethan lay fully dressed on top of the covers, listening to the wind rattle the loose pane in the window and the distant lowing of a cow from the barn. He waited until the rhythm of breathing downstairs deepened into sleep, then slipped out of bed, avoiding the noisy floorboards. He moved silently down the stairs, pausing at the bottom to listen. Landon's form was a dark shape under the quilt on the couch, facing away. Ethan crept to the mudroom where Landon's jacket hung on the peg. His fingers slipped into the pocket, brushing lint and a receipt before closing around the cold metal of the keys. Outside, the night air bit sharp against his skin. The moon was hidden behind clouds, plunging the yard into near blackness. Ethan navigated the path to the machine shed by memory, the smell of diesel and hay growing stronger. He approached the pickup, inserted the key slowly into the trunk lock, and turned it with careful pressure. The latch clicked open. Inside, under the weak trunk light, sat a leather briefcase. It wasn't locked. Ethan opened it, shielding the glow with his body, and pulled out the stack of documents. The first was a quitclaim deed, transferring the entire dairy farm, Acres Barns, milking parlor mineral rights to a company called Riverstone Holdings. He flipped through the pages. Beneath the deed lay the foreclosure notice for Landon's house in town. Notice of default, outstanding balance over $350,000, immediate payment required. Emails followed, aggressive demands from the hard money lenders, final notices, threats of legal action. At the bottom was the life insurance policy on Dad. Policy amount $150,000 issued 3 weeks earlier, beneficiary listed as Mom. The signature at the bottom looked too smooth, too steady for a man who could barely hold a pen. Ethan stared at the paper, the pieces falling into place with sickening clarity. Landon wasn't trying to save the farm. The farm was fine milk production, steady bills paid. This was about saving Landon's own life from the hole he'd dug with his failed real estate gamble. And if Dad's health gave out under the pressure, the insurance money would flow to Mom, and Landon would find a way to get it. He shoved the documents back into the briefcase, closed the trunk quietly, and slipped the keys into his pocket. Proof. He had proof now. Tomorrow, when the notary arrived, he would make sure none of this went through. Ethan returned to the house, the cold plastic of the briefcase folders still pressed against his skin under his sweater. He wasn't just a son home for a birthday anymore. He was the only one who could stop what was coming. After a restless night, thick fog blanketed the farm as Ethan stepped outside just after dawn. The chill seeped through his jacket while he watched Landon emerge from the house, carrying 2 mugs of coffee, his face still heavy with sleep. Ethan waved him over toward the machine shed away from the windows where Mom or Dad might hear. "Come on," Ethan said quietly. "We need to talk. Now." Landon followed without protest, handing over one of the mugs as they ducked inside the shed among the stacked hay bales and idle tractors. The air smelled of oil and straw, familiar from years of working side by side. Ethan set the coffee down untouched on a workbench and faced his brother directly. "I know everything." Ethan started, keeping his voice low but firm. "The real estate deal that went bad. The warehouse project on that land you bought outside town. You borrowed from those high-interest lenders thinking the market would turn. It didn't. Now your house is on the line." Landon leaned against a post, rubbing the back of his neck. He didn't deny it. "Yeah, it's bad. I thought I could flip the property quick, make enough to cover the loans and have extra for the farm if things got tight here. But permits dragged buyers backed out, and the interest just kept climbing. $350,000 plus penalties. They're starting foreclosure next month if I miss another payment." Ethan crossed his arms. "The farm isn't part of your mess. It's running fine. Milk checks come in steady, equipment paid off. You don't get to drag Mom and Dad into this." Landon's eyes flashed with desperation. "If I lose my house, I'm done. No credit, no way to start over. People in town will talk. It'll shame the whole family. Transferring the farm to the company I set up buys me time. Pays off the debt clean. Mom and Dad stay here, nothing changes for them day to day." Ethan shook his head slowly. "Nothing changes, you're asking Mom to sign away everything we've got. And Dad, he can't even speak up for himself." Landon stepped closer, lowering his voice further. "She already helped once. 6 months ago when I needed that line of credit against the milking equipment to keep the project afloat. Dad couldn't sign, so I told her how to do it. Guided her hand, practiced the signature. I recorded the whole thing on my phone, just in case. If she backs out now, I have to send that video to the authorities. Bank fraud. She'd face charges, Ethan. Real ones." The words hung heavy in the dim light of the shed. Ethan felt anger rise hot in his chest. "You're blackmailing our own mother." "It's not like that," Landon insisted, though his face showed the strain. "I'm protecting everyone. One signature today and the notary seals it. Debt gone. No one loses anything important." Ethan stared at him, seeing the brother he'd grown up with, twisted by panic. "You think Mom wants to live with that betraying dad?" Landon's patience cracked. He reached out suddenly and grabbed Ethan's arm just above the elbow fingers, digging in hard enough to bruise through the jacket sleeve. "Listen to me. You stay out of this. Drive back to Chicago, forget what you think you know. If you interfere, Mom goes down for fraud. They'll take Dad away to some facility because she can't be his guardian anymore. Is that what you want? The family torn apart because you played hero?" Ethan twisted free with a sharp jerk, stepping back until the workbench pressed against his legs. Pain throbbed in his arm, but he kept his expression steady. "Letting you steal the farm isn't saving anyone. It's destroying us." Landon released a shaky breath, running a hand through his hair. "I'm out of options. These lenders aren't patient. They don't just take the house, they make life hell." Ethan rubbed his arm, mind racing. Shouting wouldn't fix this. Fighting his brother wouldn't either. Landon was cornered, dangerous in his desperation. "There are other ways," Ethan said finally. "Lawyers, real ones, not whatever shady notary you've got coming." Landon gave a bitter laugh. "Too late for that. Noon today it's done." Ethan turned toward the shed door, the fog swirling outside. "We'll see about that." He walked out without looking back, leaving Landon standing alone among the tools and shadows. The grip on his arm still burned a reminder of how far things had fallen. Family wasn't supposed to feel like this, but he wouldn't let it end here. He needed advice from someone who knew the law inside out, someone the family had trusted for decades. Mid-morning traffic was light as Ethan drove into the center of Green Bay, the fog lifting just enough to reveal the brick storefronts along Main Street. He pulled into the small parking lot behind the converted Victorian house that had served as Otis Howard's law office for more than 3 decades. The sign on the door still read, "Howard and Associates, Family Law and Estates," in faded gold letters. Ethan had known Otis since childhood. The man had drafted the original trust papers for the farm when Ethan was still in high school. Otis met him at the door, the same rumpled suit and kind eyes Ethan remembered from every family crisis over the years. "Come in, son. You look like you haven't slept." They settled in the back office, where sunlight filtered through heavy drapes onto shelves lined with legal volumes. Ethan placed his phone on the desk and opened the photos he'd taken in the shed trunk the night before. Otis adjusted his glasses and scrolled slowly through each image, his expression growing graver with every swipe. "Quitclaim deed to Riverstone Holdings," Otis murmured. "Foreclosure notice on Landon's house, $350,000 plus penalties. And this policy on your father, $150,000 issued recently." He set the phone down carefully. "This is serious, Ethan. Very serious." Ethan leaned forward. "Landon's trying to force Mom to sign it over today. He has a notary coming at noon. Dad can't speak properly or move his right side. He's in no condition to understand any of this." Otis nodded slowly, tapping a finger on the desk. "The farm is held in a revocable living trust your parents set up 10 years ago. I drafted it myself. The deed isn't in their names directly, it's in the trust. To sell or transfer real property, both trustees must sign Carol and Jean. And for a signature to be valid, the signer must have capacity. They have to comprehend the nature and consequences of what they're signing." "So Dad can't legally sign," Ethan said. "Not on his own." Otis agreed. "Aphasia from the stroke affects expression, not necessarily understanding, but if the notary suspects incapacity or duress, Wisconsin law requires them to refuse the notarization." Chapter 140. "It's clear. They can't just stamp and walk away if something looks wrong." Ethan exhaled. "Landon's counting on a notary who won't ask questions." Otis leaned back in his chair. "That's where we have leverage. Your mother has already been tricked into signing your father's name once on that equipment line of credit. If Landon has a recording, that's leverage against her. But pushing her to commit a second fraud today, in front of witnesses, is different. We can't go to the police yet, that would expose her to immediate charges, but we can make the signing impossible." Ethan rubbed his temples. "How?" "Create a scene," Otis said plainly. "Not violence, nothing that escalates, but undeniable pressure. You go back there before noon. When the notary arrives, you step in calmly. State the facts. Your father suffered a stroke. 18 months ago, he has documented aphasia. He cannot communicate effectively, and you have reason to believe he's under duress. Ask the notary directly if they believe he has capacity. Most reputable notaries will hesitate. If they proceed anyway, they risk their commission and possible liability for aiding fraud. Ethan pictured the moment, the papers on the table. Landon hovering, Mom frozen in fear. What if Landon tries to spin it? Say I'm overreacting. Then you point to the trust language, Otis replied. It requires both trustees to sign knowingly. One mark under coercion isn't valid. And if your father can make any gesture of refusal anything clear, he does. Notaries are trained to watch for that. The key is presence. You have to be there, visible, vocal, but controlled. Make it impossible for the notary to ignore the red flags. Ethan stood and paced the small room. I can do that. But if it goes wrong, if the notary stamps it anyway, then we fight it in court, Otis said. Challenge the deed on grounds of undue influence and lack of capacity. It would be a long battle, but the trust gives us strong footing. The farm stays protected until resolved, but prevention is better. Stop the signature today, that's the cleanest path. Ethan stopped pacing and met Otis's eyes. Thank you. I needed this. Otis walked him to the door. Be careful with Landon. Desperation makes people unpredictable. Call me if anything changes. Ethan drove back toward the farm, with the plan solid in his mind. The clock on the dashboard showed 10:45. He had just over an hour to get there and position himself. The fog had burned off completely now, leaving the sky a pale winter blue. He gripped the wheel tighter. This wasn't about revenge. It was about protecting what remained of his family. Noon arrived with the crunch of tires on gravel as a rusted Honda Civic rolled into the yard. The notary stepped out carrying a briefcase and a clipboard, his cheap suit rumpled from the drive. Landon met him at the porch steps, shaking hands briskly, and leading him inside to the living room where the coffee table had been cleared and positioned in front of Dad's wheelchair. Mom stood in the corner near the window, arms wrapped tightly around herself, face pale. Dad sat motionless, his good left hand resting limp in his lap, eyes fixed on the floor. Landon arranged the papers in a neat stack, then placed the pen in Dad's paralyzed right fingers, closing them gently but firmly around it. Easy now, Landon murmured. Just a mark. The notary needs to see it. The notary, a balding man in his 50s with a nervous smile, sat opposite Dad and opened his stamp case. Mr. Roberts, can you hear me? This is a deed transfer. Do you understand you're signing away ownership of the property? Dad's head lifted slightly. His mouth worked, but only a soft, garbled sound emerged. Landon leaned over the wheelchair. He's had a stroke, but he knows what's happening. Just guide the hand if needed. He's ready. Ethan had been waiting in the hallway, listening to every word. The moment the notary reached for the papers, he stepped through the doorway, voice steady despite the rage boiling inside. Stop, Ethan said clearly. You need to hear this before you stamp anything. The notary startled, knocking his pen to the floor. Landon spun around, face flushing red. Ethan, get out. This doesn't concern you. It concerns me when my father is being forced to sign something he can't possibly understand. Ethan moved to the center of the room, positioning himself between Landon and the table. He had a stroke 18 months ago. Aphasia. He can comprehend some things, but he can't speak or write clearly. And right now he's under duress. Look at him. Look at my mother. This isn't voluntary. The notary glanced from Ethan to Dad, then to Mom, who had started trembling visibly. Sir, I need to confirm capacity. Mr. Roberts, do you wish to sign this deed? Dad's eyes met Ethan's for a brief second. Then, with visible effort, he raised his left hand, the one that still had strength, and brought it down hard on the table. The impact scattered papers knocked over the ink pad and sent coffee mugs crashing to the floor. A low, guttural roar escaped his throat, distorted but unmistakable. No. The word came out wet and broken, but it carried across the room like a thunderclap. Mom gasped, hand flying to her mouth. Landon froze, the color draining from his face. The notary scrambled to his feet chair, scraping back. I can't proceed. This signer is clearly not capable, and there's obvious duress. I'm not stamping anything. He gathered his briefcase, hastily, stamp case snapping shut. Landon lunged forward, grabbing the man's sleeve. Wait, you can't just leave. He made a mark. You saw it. I saw coercion. The notary snapped, yanking his arm free. And I won't be part of it. If you force this, I'll report it myself. He hurried toward the door shoes, squeaking on the hardwood. The front door slammed behind him, followed by the roar of the Civic's engine and tires spinning on gravel as he sped away. The room fell silent except for Dad's ragged breathing. Papers lay scattered across the floor like fallen leaves. Mom dropped to her knees beside the wheelchair, tears streaming down her face as she took Dad's shaking left hand in hers. Landon stood motionless, staring at the empty doorway. You ruined everything, he whispered, voice cracking. You have no idea what you've done. Ethan didn't answer. He knelt beside his father, checking for any sign of distress beyond the obvious exhaustion. Dad's eyes were open, lucid, but his chest rose and fell too quickly. The effort of that single act had taken everything he had left. Mom looked up at Ethan, voice barely audible. What now? Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder. We wait for whatever comes next. But the farm is safe. That's what matters. Landon backed away toward the door, eyes darting between them. This isn't over, he muttered, but the words lacked conviction. He turned and walked out the screen door, banging shut behind him. Ethan stayed on the floor with his parents, the weight of the moment settling over them like dust after a storm. The papers remained where they had fallen, unsigned, unstamped, useless. But the cost of stopping them was only beginning to show. The room was still ringing with the notary's departure when Dad's breathing changed. What started as rapid gasps turned into wet, labored pulls, his chest heaving unevenly, as if fighting for every bit of air. Ethan dropped to his knees beside the wheelchair, hands hovering, unsure where to touch. Dad, stay with me. Ethan's voice cracked. Mom rushed forward, pressing her palm to Dad's cheek, her own tears falling freely now. Dad's eyes rolled back slightly, pupils dilating, and his body stiffened. A second stroke hit hard, the kind that struck the brainstem like a hammer, cutting off control while leaving consciousness intact. Locked-in syndrome. He could see, he could hear, but nothing moved below the eyes. No words, no gestures, no way to tell them he was still there inside the shell. Mom collapsed against the chair, sobbing into Dad's lap. Jean. Oh God, Jean! Ethan fumbled for his phone, dialing 911 with shaking fingers. Emergency. My father just had another stroke. He's not moving, barely breathing. Send help now. He gave the address, voice steady, despite the terror clawing at him. Outside, tires spun wildly on gravel. Landon had bolted from the porch the moment the notary drove off. Ethan caught a glimpse through the window, his brother jumping into the pickup, slamming the door, engine roaring as he peeled out of the yard. The truck fishtailed onto the county road, heading towards the interstate. The ambulance arrived, first lights flashing across the fields. Paramedics rushed in, assessing Dad quickly. They loaded him onto the stretcher with careful efficiency, oxygen mask over his face, monitors beeping. Mom climbed in beside him, clutching his hand, whispering apologies he could no longer answer. Ethan followed in his SUV, heart pounding the entire drive to the hospital. Meanwhile, on I-43 north of Green Bay, Landon's pickup flew past the speed limit. The road curved sharply near the bridge over the Fox River. He misjudged the turn tires, losing grip on the damp pavement. The truck veered, flipped once, twice, rolling into the shallow embankment below. Metal, crumpled glass shattered, and the vehicle came to rest on its side in the ditch. State troopers arrived within minutes, lights cutting through the afternoon gloom. They found Landon conscious but trapped, leg-pinned blood on his forehead. As they pried him free, one officer spotted the leather briefcase wedged in the back seat. Papers spilled out, quit-claim deed foreclosure notices, the life insurance policy. Another trooper pulled out a phone screen, cracked but still functional with the video Landon had threatened Mom with. By the time they loaded Landon into the ambulance, he was already talking, rambling about debts lenders, how it was all to save the family. The troopers listened, then read him his rights. Charges would come financial fraud, forgery, coercion. The evidence in the truck was damning. At the county hospital, Ethan paced the waiting room while doctors worked on Dad. The neurologist emerged after what felt like hours, face grim. The second stroke was severe. Brainstem involvement. He's stable for now, but he's locked in. Conscious, aware, but completely paralyzed except for eye movement. He'll need full-time care, ventilator, feeding tube, 24-hour nursing. It's permanent. Mom sat in a plastic chair, staring at the floor. Ethan knelt beside her, arm around her shoulders. He's still here, Mom. He can hear us. We'll get through this. She nodded, slowly, tears silent now. I should have stopped him sooner. Ethan didn't answer. There was no comfort in blame, not yet. Back on the highway, tow trucks hauled the wrecked pickup away. The briefcase and phone went into evidence bags. Landon was transported to the same hospital under guard, leg, broken ribs, cracked but alive. When the detective questioned him later, he confessed pieces of the truth: desperation, bad investments, the pressure from lenders who didn't forgive debts. The video on the phone sealed the rest. Ethan stayed at the hospital until visiting hours ended. He kissed Dad's forehead, whispered that the farm was safe, that they would figure everything out. Then he drove Mom home in silence, the weight of the day pressing down on both of them. The sun had set by the time they reached the farm. Cows needed milking, but neither had the strength. Ethan would handle it in the morning. For now, they sat in the dark kitchen, two people holding what was left of their family together. Weeks later, winter had settled over the farm like a heavy blanket of snow. Dad had come home from the hospital 2 days earlier, transferred to a hospital bed set up in the living room that once held family photos and board games. A ventilator hissed rhythmically beside him, keeping his lungs working while feeding tubes delivered nutrition through his nose. His eyes followed movement in the room, alert and aware, but the rest of his body remained still trapped in the locked-in state the doctors had warned about. Full-time care was now a reality. Nurses came in shifts, machines beeped through the night, and the once quiet house filled with the constant sound of medical equipment. Ethan had taken over the daily operations. He rose before dawn to milk the cows, cleaned the parlor, checked feed levels, and balanced the books. The herd was healthy production, steady, and the milk checks arrived on time. The farm remained stable, debt-free, still in the family name. No transfer had taken place. No lender had claimed it. But the victory felt hollow. Mom moved through the days quietly, her probation sentence hanging over her like a shadow. 2 years of supervised release. No jail time, thanks to the plea deal, but the felony record for the earlier forgery meant she could no longer serve as Dad's legal guardian. Court-appointed oversight had been assigned paperwork piling up on the kitchen table. She spent hours at Dad's bedside reading to him from old farm journals, holding his hand, whispering apologies he could only answer with blinks. Landon's fate had been sealed quickly. The evidence from the wrecked pickup, the documents, the phone with the recording had been more than enough. The district attorney charged him with financial fraud, forgery, and coercion. The judge handed down a sentence of 5 years with the possibility of parole after 3, if he showed good behavior. His house in town was already in foreclosure, the lenders moving fast now that the criminal case had removed any chance of negotiation. He sat in county jail, awaiting transfer to state prison. No visitors, no calls home. Ethan had not spoken to him since the day of the notary. No letters, no phone calls, no messages through Mom. The silence was deliberate, final. Every time he thought of reaching out, he remembered the grip on his arm in the shed, the threats against Mom, the way Landon had tried to trade Dad's life for his own escape. Some lines could not be crossed back over. The farm continued to run the cows, unaware of the changes inside the house. Ethan stood on the porch one evening watching the sun drop behind the bare trees, the sky turning the color of old bruises. He felt the loneliness settle in his chest, deep and permanent. He had saved the land, but the family that once worked it together was gone. Dad trapped in his body, Mom carrying guilt she might never shake, and Landon cut off forever. The cost had been higher than any debt. He thought about the lesson this whole ordeal had taught. Greed and desperation can twist even the closest relationships into something unrecognizable. When someone starts valuing money over blood, the damage spreads quietly until it's too late to repair. Trust once broken in a family rarely comes back whole. And sometimes protecting what matters most means walking away from the person who would destroy it. If you've stayed with this story until the end, thank you. It means a lot that you listened through the pain, the tension, and the heartbreak. Stories like this remind us how fragile family can be, and how important it is to protect it before it's too late. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What would you have done in Ethan's place? Share in the comments below. And if this touched you, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more real-life family dramas. Until next time.